Hello, this is Ken Gagne with YouTube channel GameBits with this week's installment of IndieSider, where we play indie games and then talk to the developer. This week I have the distinct honor of playing A Bird Story, a game I've been looking forward to for a while. Now, I previously did a long play of this game on my YouTube channel, and that is, I played the entire game beginning to end in a single video. And I originally started that video as a traditional Let's Play with me doing audio commentary over the game. And it wasn't long before I realized that my commentary contributed nothing, and in fact was distracting from the inherent value of the game. Because this game contains no text and no spoken dialogue. So there is no words in this game, basically, except for the title screen that you see right here. And I just felt that me adding dialogue to the game, even if it's my own monologue, just wasn't necessary. However, this week I am interviewing the developer of the game, Mr. Ken Gao, and so before I bring him on the line, just a little bit about this game. It is a 1-hour narrative, sort of an interactive story with very little gameplay mechanics. There are no puzzles, no combat, and much of the time you don't even have control over your main character. They are just going about their lives as this little boy discovers a bird with a broken wing and nurses it back to health. Games from this developer, Freebird Games, are often noted for their soundtrack, and a lot of the story is told through the music and through the animation. As you can see, it's sort of a 16-bit graphic style. This game is available on Steam for Windows, Mac, and Linux for $5, or you can buy it with the soundtrack for $7. You can also buy the soundtrack separately for $3, and if you buy the soundtrack from Steam, it's actually missing 3 tracks. There are 37 tracks on the Steam version, and you can get tracks 38, 39, and 40 for free from Bandcamp. The other notable aspect of this game is that it is a interquel. It is set between 2 games, those games being To the Moon and To the Moon 2. To the Moon 2 is not out yet, and I have not played the original To the Moon, so this is my first experience with this publisher's game. That said, I did enjoy the game. Although it has low replay value, I will introduce it to my friends and recommend that they give it a try, especially those who may not be traditional gamers or who may not be familiar with the kind of narrative that this medium is capable of exploring. And I'm excited to be able to explore how the developer went about doing so, so let's go ahead and bring the developer on the line. Today I'm speaking with the founder, director, composer, and all-around great guy, Ken Gao of Freebird Games, which recently published To the Moon. Hello, sir.
Hi there, nice to be here.
Thank you for your time, I appreciated it. So I just finished playing To the Moon. There's a full 1-hour long play on my YouTube channel, and I played this game without, unfortunately, having played your previous game, most recent game, To the Moon, which I've been wanting to play ever since I picked it up in a humble bundle about a year or 2 ago. Tell me, what am I missing by this being the first time I've played a Freebird game?
Nothing really. To be honest, I think it might actually be a better practice to play A Bird Story before To the Moon, because I think having after played To the Moon, there are a lot more expectations of not just of and I don't mean that by a matter of quality or whatnot, but the different kind of game it is. A Bird Story is much more minimalistic. It really is meant to be a very simple short, whereas To the Moon is one of the more, it's more like a feature than a short.
So I've played A Bird Story. It took me about an hour to finish. How long is To the Moon in comparison?
It's about 4.5 hours.
Okay. Have people gone from that game to A Bird Story and been surprised or disappointed?
They have. Yeah, I've definitely been seeing reactions from both sides. Like those who played To the Moon and then they played A Bird Story, and some of them loved it. Some of them did enjoy like the different way it was presented, because in a way it really is a very different game, if you would call it that. But then there are people who expected a story that's much more in depth, and it has like that actually has twists and all that, like To the Moon, for example. So yeah, there were definitely people on both sides of the reaction.
You said it's a different kind of game if you choose to call it that. Are there those who do not consider this a game?
Certainly. I mean, to be honest, I myself, I'm kind of on the fence. I'd like for it to be considered a game. I feel like the term game is still somewhat loose of a term. Especially considering, compared to movie, like I really think games have a completely additional dimension to it. I mean, and completely like additional dimension compared to movie. So they're actually not on the same tier. Whereas in movie you have the genres of movie, you have the action movie, romance movie, etc. For games, you can have all that, and then what kind of game it is, and that has different levels of interactivity or gameplay or different types of involvement.
That's true. There is the kind of story that the game is trying to tell, and then there's how it's trying to tell the story, and those are two different kinds of things. It's kind of like a cappella music or interactive fiction text adventures. That is the manner in which they're presenting their art, but it's not what the art contains.
Definitely.
So in that case, why did you choose to tell your story as a video game when its interactive features are, somewhat minimal? You could have made a book or a graphic novel, for example.
To be honest, I really do think the subtle interactivity to it does play a significant role in like a more subtle way. For To the Moon, for example, a part of the gameplay involves going around the map, and it's almost like a egg hunt. You find different mementos that mean something to the character at that scene of their life. So from a purely mechanical sense, it's just an egg hunt, pixel hunt. You look for items that perhaps that by chance activate something. But from the story perspective, my personal belief, I suppose, is that it actually does give that more of an impact to the memorability of each item. And the story is almost like putting together a puzzle. It's told in a reverse chronological order, and all these different mementos kind of chain together to the final conclusion at the end. If you were to watch that as a movie, it's different. It's hard to keep track of where each item was in the timeline and at the places, and what they were. You would blink of the eye and you've missed it. But in a scenario of like an active involvement, even if it's just finding the item and clicking on it, I think that has more of an impact on the memory, and it makes it easier when you finally need to draw all the memories of the items you found in different timelines and put them together.
No, that makes plenty of sense, and that's been my own experience as well. Just the act of being engaged in something makes it more memorable. For example, taking notes about a lecture as opposed to just being lectured.
Right.
Is A Bird Story based on any personal experiences or any pets that you've had?
It's I would say I would go as far as to say all my games are pretty much based on personal experiences, but it's always mixed of truth and fiction. As far as pets go, there was I did have some interactions with a bird when I was a kid. That was actually when I was I forgot how old, but how young, but I think it was definitely before I was 10. It was a winter time, and I actually found I think it was a sparrow. I'm not certain because at the time I had no idea, but it was kind of just flopping around on the ground, and it apparently couldn't fly. So I brought it back home, and my mom was scared because she's afraid of mice, and that kind of reminded her of it. I still have no idea what happened there, but it actually had it had kind of a runny nose, and I didn't even know that birds can have that. But I tried to take care of it. I tried to. It was cold outside, so I kind of brought it in and put it in like a little shoebox with holes on it, and then I put some grains and rice and stuff in there and some water. But no, it didn't survive the night. That was only what made me decide the setting of the game. But I don't know. Maybe it's like cathartic to have something that perhaps ending a better way.
I've noticed that birds are a recurring theme in your games, not only in A Bird Story and in a previous game you made called The Mirror Lied, but even right in the name of your organization, Freebird Games. Why is this?
What can I say? Birds are cool. I don't know. It's just just the sense of, flight, I suppose. It's, I guess, like, even in the game, in the name of the, the game label, Freebird Games, it's not just like bird, it's a free bird. There's that sense of freedom that comes with the sense of bird that, takes you anywhere. And I don't know, I guess I just like flying. to put it simply.
So if you had to choose between being invisible or being able to fly, you'd go with flying every time.
Yeah, I mean, if you fly really high, that's like the same as being visible, right?
I never thought of it that way. That's so true. Your game is also notable for not including any dialogue, either written or spoken, and that, I think, opens your game up to a much wider audience. You have not only people who may not know one language or the other, but also people whose language skills just aren't that good. For example, a friend of mine said she wanted to play your game with her 6-year-old daughter because her language skills aren't the best, and if she can get into a game without having to stumble over the text and really pore over it, that will really draw her in. Did you have specific audiences in mind when you made that decision?
At first, no. At first, it was, I mean, I pretty much, to be honest, I make games in a very selfish way. I make them for myself as almost like a catharsis kind of way. And I was actually on the fence for the longest time with whether to put some dialogues in there. And what really made me tip over to the side of just completely no dialogue was that, the universality of it. Yeah, and I'm really fond of sometimes when you watch like an animated short and there's no dialogue and it conveys something so simple but very pure. And, no matter what culture you're in, what language you speak, you get it. And I think that's something very fascinating and something, although simple, but also profound in some other ways, in the sense that it connects people. And so, yeah, that's what made me tip over to that side of the fence.
Were there things that you felt you needed to include in the game to compensate for the lack of dialogue? For example, I noticed that the sprites in this game have 10 times more frames of animation than in your previous game.
Yeah, it's well, I would not exactly 10 times the frames, but just the number of sprites that were used. Yeah, that was definitely necessary to compensate for it, and it was one of the more, it's probably the most challenging aspect of it, to convey things graphically, but with such limited type of graphic. In most wordless storytelling media, like animated short, etc. You have different camera angles. You can zoom out. It's easy to show something by just literally showing the picture of it. But something I ran into that was very troublesome while making a bird story was, for example, there was a scene where with the well, it's not too much of a spoiler, but okay, so it involves blankets, right? And for the longest time on the script, it's extremely simple, but when I put it in like a pixel art, and it doesn't help that my pixel art skills suck, nobody could tell what was going on in that scene. So I had to play around and devise like different ways to see if it works, just to get around that pixel graphics barrier.
One of the other qualities of your game that really speaks to the players is the audio, and in both of your last two games the soundtrack has been magnificent. As I said, I've never played To the Moon, and often if I am going to appreciate a game's soundtrack, I need to have some familiarity with the context in which the music is occurring. I need to know what sort of scene it's trying to invoke. But with To the Moon soundtrack, I don't have to have played the game. I love that soundtrack, and A Bird Story is quite excellent as well. And yet, in a recent interview with Analog Addiction, you said that you don't consider yourself that much of a composer. So why you sit down on yourself?
I mean, to be honest, I think in some ways it's definitely true. Like from a technical aspect, I am not much of a composer at all. Like I didn't really go to, I didn't study theory in that sense. And what helps with the things that I make is that even if the people who aren't, who are listening to it, like haven't played the actual game itself, it was composed with context, and not just knowing the context, but because I'm fortunate enough, to be able to control both at the same time. I really do think that carries over to something. And I think, the difference between a great soundtrack and a great, and it's just like a lot of great tracks, bundled in your bag, is that with the soundtrack, there's a linearity. There's something that, connects everything together. And that, even if you listen to the soundtrack itself, it almost tells a story with the recurring motifs and, just the linking together of ideas.
So you have the soundtrack, you have the the sprites, and yet in the interview with Analog Addiction, you commented that some of the parts of the game were so hard to get just right that they had to be made and remade. Since you are so involved with the production of your game, as people can pick up from the many titles you carry with Freebird Games, what would you say is the hardest part of making a game like A Bird Story?
Well, I would say from a technical perspective, it was definitely just getting around the barriers of the low resolution graphics and the like. There are the more difficult aspects of it that I don't know. It's more on the personal front, so it's not really much of an actual technical aspect.
So from a narrative perspective, what beats in the game or what scenes in the game did you really have to work at to say, yeah, that's conveying the message, or this is what I want the player to get across?
This may not be the most difficult, but it's definitely what first came to mind, and that is the first act per se. I wanted to kind of convey a sense of loneliness, but not exactly in a pitiful sense. Like the boy goes home and he's still having fun, even though he's not lonely. He's not just like totally depressed. And I think that was one of the more difficult parts to get across. And I still think it could have been so much better, especially in matter of a sense of player involvement, I suppose, because I think that is one of the more like the beginning part of the game before the bird is actually introduced. That part of the game is very slow paced. So yeah, I think something could have been done with that to retain that mood, but still add more of a sense of involvement.
You mentioned that the character is lonely in a sort of longing sense, how he just feels like something is missing. You could say that this game is about a little boy who finds a wounded bird and nurses him back to health, but that's at a very superficial level that the game is being described. More substantially, what would you say the game is about, or what themes is it trying to convey?
I would say loneliness and selfishness. Those are the two.
Selfishness?
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it a selfless act of the boy to help the bird?
Is it? Does he help it because he wanted the bird to be better, just purely because of that, or was he just looking for a friend? I mean, I feel like toward the end of the game, you almost see his selfish side kind of manifest, and a lot of his decisions are questionable, to be honest. And yeah, I think those are the two.
Now, as I mentioned, you wear many hats at Freebird Games, but you also have quite a team working with you, helping with animation, composition, and the like. How did you find such talented individuals? How did you attract them to work with Freebird, and where are they even located?
I have no idea. I've always just thought myself to be substantially lucky to just run into people like that. Let's see, a lot of them I did. When I was starting to make games many years ago, I was more involved in a lot of the game making communities, and back then we did a lot of bartering, because none of us had any money, and we were just so I would be writing music, and I'm be making my game, and someone else would be making their graphics, and they would be making their game. So whenever I needed some graphics done, and I absolutely cannot do, I knock on their door, and I'd be like, hey, I'll write you this music for your game if you can help me with some of the graphics here for my game. So that was a lot of what came to be, and I think even now that's almost all of the folks who I'm working with right now. That's how we came to be.
So you have credits in a lot of other games, other people's games, besides Freebird?
Well, no, this is from way back, and I think most of the games weren't finished. But yeah, I do have some random credits from back in the days in a lot of the indie games.
I mean, how far back are we talking here?
Oh, 2007.
Oh, way back.
Yeah.
Okay. So, speaking of going back many years, A Bird Story was years in the making. When can we hope to see your next game, To the Moon 2?
To be honest, it's actually probably going to be sooner than the time between To the Moon and A Bird Story. A Bird Story, this is part of the thing I feel actually kind of bad about, the fact that it took so long for something that's seemingly so short and a small of a project. There were really a lot of extraordinary circumstances involved, and that contributed to the delays of the game. But for the next game, it's going to be much less. Like, it's so odd because Bird Story is like the simplest thing I've made, but it's so complicated to make for so many reasons, even though it doesn't seem like it. But the next game is going to be more, to the moon, like more of a feature. And I honestly think it's going to be a lot easier to make. And it's actually been like floating around in my head for a long time now. So it's not, I already have the main direction of how it will go planned out. So hopefully that will make it a lot more of a smoother production.
Do you recommend that gamers will have played the original To the Moon and A Bird Story before they play To the Moon 2?
To the Moon, not so much, but A Bird Story, it will have. It definitely would. I'm trying to make it so it's not necessary to have played A Bird Story, but it's definitely better if they have. And there's a lot more depth to the character that could be understood, even though it might seem so simple by itself.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to playing it. One of the biggest obstacles for me to get my hands on the original To the Moon was the lack of a Mac port, and I'm very glad to see that A Bird Story came out simultaneously for PC and Mac, and I'm hopeful that that sets the precedent for your future games to have simultaneous releases as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I do think that will be the case because the technical difficulties have actually been worked out already for the engine. So with each new release, it should be fairly guaranteed, and that is all thanks to folks who from the Freebird Games community actually that I met them from, the Ancurio who helped make it like the engine actually possible, and Ali who helped with the Mac port. And yeah, I'm really grateful for them, and it wouldn't have been possible without them.
Great, and I'm grateful as well. So remind our listeners where we can find your games and you online.
Oh, sure. Well, I suppose just it's on Steam, GOG, and Humble Store. For all of them, and I think To the Moon right now is also on Green Man Gaming. But yeah, like I just suppose freebirdgames.com. That's the hub of where all the things are.
And you yourself are on Twitter as well?
Yep, I am, and my Twitter and Facebook for Freebird is linked on freebirdgames.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to playing more of your games, sir.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for the chat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.